Spider mites. Darren, I can't stand spider mites. Here's the biggest problem I've got. Nobody has an exact threshold out there. You look at any university, any agronomist, they have no exact number. Of course, even if they did have an exact number, how are you going to count those tiny little mites?
Well, and the other thing that comes into play is, when do we normally have spider mite problems? It's when it's hot and dry and the crop is stressed.
Right.
And now you say, well, maybe my crop could tolerate more spider mites, but I'm under so much stress right now, it really can't tolerate any insects at all.
The other way is you say, well, it's hot and dry. I've got drought type conditions. I don't want to invest any more dollars into my crop. And then it really goes downhill. So we're standing in a soybean crop here, and we were talking a little before the show. We walk out here,
it's
and Darren
starting
goes,
to suffer a little
Yep,
bit.
Darren says, this crop's suffering.
We need rain.
And I said, nah. Soybeans love this kind of weather. They like it hot and dry fairly early on. Once you start getting into August though, then we do need some moisture. So once we hit the 1st of August, we got to start getting some moisture, and then we're typically going to have good beans. But keep in mind, soybeans like lots of sunlight, and soybeans are a much different crop than corn. So even in this bad drought year of 2012, just a year ago, we had all kinds of great soybean yields out there because people started getting moisture at the end of the season, and crops they thought were lost came back and all of a sudden yielded pretty well. So what I'm trying to say is, don't give up on your crop. It's inexpensive to treat for spider mites. Consider treating if you see a lot of them.
Here's one of the things that's going on right now in soybeans in our area. Farmers are finding soybean aphids, and they're going out to spray soybean aphids, and they're thinking about cost and saying, well, what's the cheapest thing I can use that'll kill soybean aphids? Well, there are some really cheap pyrethroids that may only cost $2 or $3 an acre, and a lot of guys are just saying, yep, let's do that. Let's not spend any more money. We're getting late in the season. But what they're forgetting to do is scout for spider mites, because a lot of those cheaper pyrethroids may do a nice job on soybean aphids, but they don't get spider mites. And once we wipe out all the other bugs in the field and leave spider mites alone, the spider mite numbers often explode.
Okay, so let's be real specific here. When we're talking about products like Silencer and Declare, they are very inexpensive, just over $2 an acre for the full rate, and you'll wipe out your aphids and just about any other bug except for spider mites. If you have spider mites, that's where you would want to go with something like Capture, or the generic is called Fanfare, or you could go with Lorsban, or the generic there would be called Pilot, or there are many other generics too. So it's that Capture family, that Lorsban family, those are the ones that actually have spider mite activity. All those other pyrethroids, whether it's Silencer, Declare, Warrior, Asana, a whole host of them, they're not going to stop the spider mites.
Now, as far as scouting for spider mites, they are really, really tiny little bugs, and finding the first few spider mites that are in a field is pretty tough. Normally the numbers explode a little bit, and you start seeing a little bit of webbing, often on the undersides of leaves, right along the midrib on corn leaves, for example, and that's where you start noticing something. Or on soybeans, maybe you see a little discoloration on the leaf, and you see some tiny little speckling on the leaf. That's how a lot of times will see, oh my goodness, we've got spider mites out there. But before you're spraying any insecticide in your field, you absolutely have to scout. Look for those symptoms. Talk to other growers in your area. If you hear somebody else is starting to get spider mites, chances are you are as well.
Okay, so in terms of threshold, we don't have any real great numbers for you. I wish that we did. When we start seeing a lot of plants that have spider mites on them, we're typically treating on our farm. There are some people that will say, well, you don't want spider mites getting to your ear leaf on corn. There are some people who will say, well, when you see them on several leaves on a soybean plant, that's the time you want to do something. I just say, look, we probably have other bugs out there anyway. We're probably going out to treat anyway. If you see any spider mites out there, or even think you're going to get spider mites, I would upgrade your cheap pyrethroid up to a Fanfare or a Lorsban product. It'll probably cost you an extra $2 an acre. It's not very much money, but then at least you've got spider mite protection.
And fortunately for this year, a lot of growers remember 2012, where we were really dry across most of the country, and spider mites are probably the worst that I've seen in the last 20 years. And so many farmers remember, oh, yeah, last year I had to do something when I got hot and dry. So this year already farmers are asking questions like, it's kind of getting hot and dry again. I remember last year we had to change insecticides, and so it is top of mind for many growers that had a spider mite issue last year. But make sure that you aren't just looking at the lowest dollar. Make sure you're looking at the best return for your farm, and make sure that you're killing all the harmful bugs in your fields when you're making an extra pass.
Let me just say too, the reason why we have spider mites when it's hot and dry is because typically there is a fungal pathogen that is going to attack spider mites and kill them when it's cooler and wetter. So if we all of a sudden turn around in your area, let's say, to cool and wet conditions for a while, your odds that you're going to have a spider mite problem dramatically go down. If it stays hot and dry in your area for quite some time, chances are you're going to see spider mites again this year.
Well, there are a lot of things going on in cornfields too that we're going to talk about in a little bit. One of those things may be our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?